Okay, we're live. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Mathilde. I'm the co-founder of Jam. I'm calling you from Barcelona, where I'm based. And I'm joined by Gibson Biddle, calling us from Utah. Hi, Gibson.
Hello, Mathilde. I am in sunny Park City, Utah right now. And hello to everybody in London and Jammers and anyone else we found today on the interwebs.
So this is our very first Jam webinar, and we couldn't hope for a better guest, to be honest. Gibson, is also known as Gib, was the VP product at Netflix in its early days for 5 years. He then became the CPO of the textbook rental company called Chegg that he helped take public in 2013. So now Gib is a speaker, a teacher, an advisor, and his workshops and talks have helped countless product teams and product people succeed over the years. He talks about product leadership, strategy, career hacking, and so on. So, Gib, I'm really thrilled to have you here today with us for this webinar. But I'm even more thrilled that we'll get to see you in person at Jam on November 1st, right?
I will be there, I promise.
Great.
And then on November 2 also, correct?
Exactly, because you're going to be giving a talk at Jam, sharing more insider stories from your time at Netflix, but also doing a workshop on how people can hack their product leader career on November 2nd. So more on that at the end of the webinar. We'll have a discount for you guys. We're just going to get...
Sorry. How much do we get? How much do we get?
15%. Stay tuned.
Okay.
Promo code.
Good.
We're just going to wait a couple of minutes before we get started that people are joining. Whilst we do that, I just want to tell you that basically this webinar isn't meant to be just a presentation where you passively follow along. I mean, we cannot see you or talk to you, but you can use the YouTube chat on the top right corner that you should see in the top right corner of your screen. So at any point, use this chat to interact with us, to share questions, comments. I'll be your voice, basically. I'll be monitoring this chat and basically interrupt Gib nicely at some points during the sessions to have him answer your questions and your comments. We'll also have some dedicated time for Q&A at the end. Actually, let's just try it out. Can you please all just, anybody who's here, say who you are, just say hi, where you work. Hi, Seb. Seb is the other Jam co-founder.
Where is he?
He is in Luxembourg, actually. He moved back there from London.
Hello, Seb.
Anyone else using the chat? Just say hi. Stefan, the head of product at Debut in London. Great. What is Debut, Stefan? Seb is making a joke. Can you hear me? Jury, hi, Jury. Strategic partnerships at Broly, an insurance startup. Okay. I think.
Yeah, and the thing I'm most curious to know is, we're just killing a couple of minutes of time.
Yeah.
What do folks like about Netflix, and what do they wish that it did better? That's what I'm quite curious about. If folks could respond to that, that would be really helpful for me.
Product people talking about Netflix as a product, that must be interesting. Let's see what people say. Oh, interesting. So as people start to answer, we have more people joining. Jack from the Victoria and Albert Museum. Hey, Jack. Stefan. Seb is saying better films. Okay. So content could be improved. What do you like about Netflix? Okay, people are shy, maybe. They just love everything about Netflix, so.
Well, Seb's not the first. Usually people say they want more original content.
Yeah.
So that's quite common. Often folks want it less expensive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then the crazy ones is one of the reasons people cancel is they find themselves watching way too much TV late at night, the binge watching.
Right.
So they complain about that to me.
Well, here Francesca is telling us she loves the addictiveness, if it's a word, can improve the content, the library. Jury is saying, personally, I think the middleware recommendations for new content could be improved. All right.
Got
it. Cool. So I think that's enough chatting for now. It's time to get started. So Gibson, over to you.
Very good. Give me 1 second to pull up my little presentation. Hello, everyone around the world. What I want to do today is talk about customer obsession. And I'd like to begin with a little bit of consumer research. So Mathilde's going to send out a little link, and it's going to ask a simple question. On a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 sucks and 10 is awesome, how likely are you to recommend Netflix to a friend or a colleague? And I'm going to share the typical result, but Mathilde, I'm sure, has shared a link, a SurveyMonkey link in the chat. If you could click on that, it would be super helpful.
It's actually, YouTube is giving me an error talking about bugs, so I cannot share that right now.
So I'm typical result, if you will, which is the Net Promoter Score for Netflix today is typically in the high 70s. So there's lots of folks that love the service, but what I really love is the folks like Seb who nicely complain about things. And there are the detractors in this particular sample. About 4% of the folks, nicely said the service sucks. And throughout my career, I've been very obsessed, and I love hearing from those folks that nicely complain about the service, because if you're not working to keep making the service better, at some point it will suck. And I'm going to sort of share how I approach this. I got interested in this concept of customer obsession because I'm always on the lookout. I join these startups with a proof of concept and then help them to grow. And I'm always on the lookout for ways to keep everybody in a company aligned. And I found, of course, strategy, mission, vision, culture, these are things that help keep folks aligned. But I found that if you could create a whole company that's focused, obsessed over ways to delight customers and to invent on their behalf, wonderful things happen. And here's a juicy quote from a billionaire. Sometimes I find billionaire juicy quotes help build credibility. And I wanted to talk very briefly about my career, and then I'm going to get on to the sort of 3 chapters, if you will, of today's webinar. So I actually joined Electronic Arts in 1991 as a product manager. I'm older than dirt. And at that time, I was trained on customer focus. I was just out of business school. I was an MBA. We were trained to do silly things like put a photo of your competitor on your desk, to always be thinking about your competitor. And these are all the letters that I read from my customers. And these were capital G gamers. They were really enthusiastic. But I found that listening to the customers and focus on the competition wasn't that as helpful as I might have expected. Later, I started a kids software company. It was called Creative Wonders. I built Sesame Street software. This is the very first hit that I ever had. And I learned about how to satisfy customers. And my audience was 2, 3, and 4-year-olds, and then their parents. And I was beginning to have more success. And then I built software with Madeline, the little French girl, Schoolhouse Rock, Arthur, Pokemon. And then ended up selling that company, Creative Wonders, to a company called The Learning Company. I don't know if he's internationally recognized, but this is Kevin O'Leary. He's Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank. And so sold that company and then helped The Learning Company to grow. And it became a big business. And I was kind of excited at the time. We sold that company to Mattel for $3.5 billion, which felt, way exciting. This is how Kevin made his money. But then something bad happened, which is I had left, Kevin had left, but about 2 years later, Mattel spit The Learning Company back out of the company. And instead of being worth $3.5 billion, it was worth $350 million. So really a bad acquisition story. And that got me reflecting on what it is to build great products in the long term. And so in 2005, I met this gentleman. This is Reed Hastings. He's the CEO of Netflix. And I interviewed with him, alert, I got the job. But Netflix was started as a DVD by mail company. And the idea was to get big, delivering DVDs back and forth in the United States. Later, we expanded to streaming and then international. But Reed only asked me 2 questions. He said, "Hey, Gib, can you delight customers?" And I thought about it, and I said, well, Elmo's preschool was quite delightful. And then I had the good luck that his young kids had actually used the software and liked it. And then his second question was, do you believe in consumer science? And luckily, I had asked him an earlier question, which was, hey, Reed, what do you want your legacy to be? And I thought he would say something like the invention of internet TV, or reinventing movies and TV, something like that, or denting the universe. And what he said was consumer science. And he explained that folks like Steve Jobs seem to have some inherent sense of style or fashion or guessing in the future, and he had none of those skills. But what he endeavored to do was to create a system where we could rapidly test everything via A/B testing and let that be the marker for what would work or not as we work to invent the future. So this webinar today, I'm going to talk about 2 dimensions. The first is the growth of Netflix from the really sucky site that you see in 1999 here. This is a product leader trick. Always remind folks of how bad the product was before you arrived, to the experience that I had at my website last night. And I hope you can see a market difference over those years. But the other dimension I want to talk about is my journey from customer focus. I learned to satisfy customers, to listen to them, and to compete. And these things were all good. But what I fundamentally learned was about this idea of customer obsession, about love, and this idea to delight customers, to experiment, to invent a future that was really, remarkably free of competitors. And for me, these are the key elements of customer obsession. So I've got 3 chapters for you today. The first, I call it the DHM model. I'll explain what that means in a second. The second, I'm going to show how this idea of consumer science applied to one area of Netflix, which is the growth of personalization. And then the third, Netflix has a challenge, a question of all of you today, which is it gives a free trial for folks for a month, but it collects your credit card at the very beginning of that 1 month free trial. And the question is, should it send a reminder at day 28 or 29, letting you know that the service is about to switch from free to paid? So we're going to get into that case, if you will. This is a modern day case. We'll look at the results. We'll talk about what the right answer is. And then, of course, I'll reveal what Netflix did. So just a brief history of Netflix. The company was started in Santa Cruz, California. Mark Randolph is the co-founder. This is just when the DVD players were starting. And he actually took an audio CD and he sent it to himself in the mail, and it arrived unbroken and unscratched. And that gave him the insight that maybe this DVD by mail service would work. By 2000, it was all you can eat service. You could have 3 DVDs sitting on top of your television. When you watch one, you return it, you get the next one from your queue. And then we launched, it was called Watch Instantly in January of 2007. The phrase streaming didn't exist yet. And if you actually used that phrase, customers thought you were saying streamlining, and that sounded bad. And we had 300 really stinky titles at the time. It was kind of bad stuff. Folks would call it steamy romance, which is, there's something else going on there. And in 2010, we launched into Canada, and that was the first time we extended internationally. And it was the first time we had a streaming only service. Big bet in 2013, this was the beginning of exclusive original content, 100 million for the episodic TV series House of Cards. By 2016, Netflix was in 190 countries. Today, it's north of 130 million subscribers. And the company has a market cap of about 150 billion. So this DHM model, my job has been largely the same for 20 or 30 years. I'm always the product leader. I work with product leaders today. And and I know there's radically different definitions of things like product management, different stages, enterprise versus consumer. But the way that I look at it very consistently is the job is to delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And the margin enhancing is just a simple way to describe a way that makes money. And this has been my job, and this is sort of the root of what I described as this DHM model. And I want to break that down a little bit for you and share with you a couple of balancing acts, if you will. So the first is this concept, the balancing act between delight and margin. It's easy to delight everyone, offer the service for free. And if you did that, you wouldn't have the money to reinvest in the future. And so I'm going to share how I think about that balancing act. In the old days, when we were DVD by mail, the challenge was that everybody wanted those new release DVDs the next day in the mail. A title would come out in a theater and then wasn't available on DVD for 2 or 3 months later. And unfortunately, those new release DVDs were very expensive to us. And this created a problem. And from some focus groups, we heard from customer service dispositioning data that customers were very unhappy with the fact that they couldn't get the new release DVDs early enough. So we A/B tested this. At a time, we were about 1 million customers, and we created a test cell for 10,000 customers that got a perfect new release DVD experience. All of these customers would get a new release DVD the next day in the mail, whereas the folks outside of that test cell in the control, if you will, often had to wait 2, 5, 10, 15 days. And I'm going to share with you the result. And the first thing to think about in A/B testing is, will this change customer behavior? And frankly, most of the time, people don't notice change, but in this case, they did. And in fact, it improved retention. Now, retention at Netflix is the measurement for delight. So in the old days, in the early days, about 10% of our customers would cancel every month. And then today, for perspective, about 2% cancel each month. And those 2% cancel because one of those points is because there's no money in their account. And the second is because it's summer and they're like, maybe I should be doing something besides binge watching. But you look, it's not a large difference between retention and this better experience versus the control. And if you do the math, if you extended this to all million customers, if we rolled it out, you would save about 5,000 customers. That would be the benefit of this. And in our calculus, that was worth to us about $1 million. And the way that we arrived at that is the 5,000 customers times the lifetime value at that time, which is about $100, times 2. And the reason that we multiplied by 2 was because this was essentially a word of mouth effect. The idea was somebody would rave about this service and tell a friend, and that would bring another member into the service. And we were essentially instrumenting a system where we doubled down on delight. The cost of providing this service, however, was $5 million. It was expensive to buy all the additional new release inventory to provide that better service. So this is one of those cases where we've got the A/B test results. And the question was, should Netflix launch the new release test to all or not launch? Well, in this case, the math says it's not worth doing, that customers are not delighted enough to warrant this additional cost. So in this case, we chose not to launch. Now, just so you know, that there's an argument that maybe this was the right thing to do. And it's all about, what is that word of mouth factor? Should it be 2? Should it be 5? At times, Amazon makes an argument that that should be as high as 8x. At the time, we were a young startup and we just didn't have the money to make that level of investment. So my second component is this concept of hard to copy. So this is circa 2005. This is the new member site. its job was to get people to click on the red start now button and to engage in a free trial. And this was a winning test cell. And the insight from the product manager was, if you put a happy family on a couch, it inspires more people to click on the red button. And HB Mock was the product manager. I said, listen, you've done good things, for delight. You've done good things for margin. But what you haven't done is created something hard to copy. I'm going to guess or bet that our key competitor at the time, Blockbuster, is going to copy your work within a month. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. Within a month, Blockbuster had their happy family on the couch. And I'm just trying to illustrate how important it is to build stuff that's hard to copy. In the work that we do in consumer tech and frankly, enterprise, think for a moment about what is hard to copy about Netflix. And I'm going to share how I think about this. The big dog over many years is the brand. So people trust Netflix. They're willing to give up their credit cards to the service. There's substantial network effects. Today, there's a device ecosystem. Every television that you buy is ready to stream Netflix instantly. There's wonderful, unique technology, and I'm going to talk about the power of personalization. And then the key job for a startup is to get big, because once you get big, you have this economy of scale that's hard to copy. Today, Netflix can afford $500 million to do Orange is the New Black, whereas Blockbuster, or forgive me, whether Hulu or Amazon can only afford half as much, or even a quarter as much, because Netflix has 130 million members. And the last issue is switching costs. Enterprise companies have this in spades. I have 4 sub-accounts for my family. It's just a lot of work to switch over to Amazon because of that. So in thinking about what delights customers in hard to copy margin enhancing ways, here are all the high level theories, the idea of how we might do all 3 of those things. And these, for me, product strategy are high level hypotheses. My hypothesis was, if you created a wonderfully personalized experience, you could delight customers, make it easier to find movies they love in hard to copy ways. It's very hard to do. And in fact, it would improve margin, that you could help people to find less expensive content that they love. So I want you to think about, I hope you think of Netflix as a wonderfully successful company, but I want you to think about for a moment the extent to which they got it right. And I'm going to reveal the answer. We got it right about half the time. So all of these high level theories and hypotheses were not correct. So I'll drill into one. Friends, if you were in Silicon Valley in 2005, 2009, every venture capitalist was asking, what's your social strategy, because of the growth of Friends. And we experimented with for 3 years. And the idea was that we would connect your friends in a network, and that would be hard to copy. You would get great movie ideas from Friends, and that would delight you. And they would help you find less expensive content. And we pounded on this for 3 years, and through consumer research and A/B testing and existing data and through survey, we finally had the insight that there's a couple of problems with this. The first is your friends have sucky movie tastes. And the second is that you're unwilling to share all of the movies that you watch. With friends, you'll talk about some highbrow documentary and not reveal the fact that on Saturday night you were watching Adam Sandler Leave Your Brains at the Door comedy. So it took us 3 years. And for me, one of the keys to success for Netflix was simply this concept of high cadence failure. We were constantly experimenting with different ideas as quickly as we could to discover the magic that would work. And just to give you a sense a little bit about our company strategy, step 1 was to get big on DVD. We said step 2 was to lead streaming. And then once we no longer had to create these DVD by mail systems and working with post offices in different countries, we could expand worldwide. And then the last step of this was to create original content, which is really hard to copy, the exclusive stuff. Now, I will tell you the truth. We tested exclusives in 2008 and it failed, but it worked clearly in 2013. And the key difference between 2008 and 13 was we had the economy of scale that led us to make big investments, essentially in the early days in episodic TV content. So what was really going on at Netflix, we were trying to create this virtuous cycle where the more customers that we had, the more willing these TV manufacturers were willing to sign up with us. And the more customers and the more that ways that you could watch where you wanted, which is on your television, then the more that we could afford to invest in content. And today it's quite simple. The more content that Netflix has, the more members it has. The more members it has, the more it can afford content. And it's a wonderful thing. So this is the product strategy over a couple of years that I was maniacally focused on. These 5 ideas. And when I'm working with product leaders, I'm looking for those key strategies, these hypotheses about how you're going to delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And then the other thing that's really important to me is that you're able to measure whether or not you're making progress against each of those strategies. So I'm laying out for you now some of the key metrics that we focused on. You can imagine in the case of Friends, we had a specific metric, we just couldn't move it, which is why we killed the effort. And the other thing you can think about is that at any moment in time, there's a variety of projects against these key strategies on the left. And these would evolve over time. And in a minute, I'm going to share some of the specific ideas in the personalization. So I'm going to get on to it. Mathilde, you're there, correct?
Yes, I'm still here, listening.
Good, good. Just text me. I got a little message on my mic, but just text me if anything goes wonky. Okay, so I want to talk about consumer science. I want to talk about consumer science in the era of personalization. And this is where, with Lock, our technology is going to work for polling. But consumer science is just a fancy way of describing the experimental method. So you have a hypothesis. Those are the strategies that I was talking about. You engage in experiments, the A/B test, like the new release one. You have the result, the data, and then you apply human judgment. And I always appreciate that human judgment is still needed in a world of AI and machine learning. And then for me, I'm always sourcing data through 4 sources. Existing data. So my first day at Netflix, I was presented with e-staff metrics, 40 different metrics that helped me to understand both customer and business behavior. Qualitative, fancy word for saying focus groups, one-on-ones, surveys. We've already done an example of a Net Promoter Survey, and we've already done an example of an A/B test. So now I'm going to just talk about how personalization grew up at Netflix. So this is what the site looked like in 2005. And if you look very carefully, you'll notice that there's really nothing personalized about it, except for the word recommendation. And newsflash, if you're engaged in personalization, recommendation, that word is very bad to use. Just think of it from a human level. If you wanted a friend of yours to go out on a date or have coffee with someone, you wouldn't say, I recommend that you have coffee with this person. You might say, hey, I think you'd like meeting this person. Or I don't know, maybe you would suggest. But I want you, this is the kind of things that we learned over time with A/B testing. And of course, in the personalization swim lane or pod, we did have a strategy. So the idea was we would collect explicit data from you, largely ratings about your movie taste. In the world of streaming, we'd have implicit data. So we would see what you watched or didn't. And then we would magically connect our knowledge of you and your taste with our knowledge and the data of movies to help you to find movies that you'll love. And that's what the algorithms were intended to do. And we had a 4th theory that over time, if we helped you to find better and better movies that were higher quality, you would retain better. And then, of course, we had projects or tactics that are matched against each of these strategies on the left. And I'm going to share some examples in a minute. And then to know me is that at any moment of time, I could measure whether or not these strategies were working. And I just want to draw your attention to this first metric, the percentage of members who rated at least 50 movies in the first 6 weeks of their membership. And that was a proxy metric for personalization. The idea was if people went through that effort to rate movies, it was because they valued the result, the output of that work. This was a proxy metric for personalization. And I want you to start thinking about, okay, at Netflix, what percentage of members would rate at least 50 movies in their first 6 weeks as a service? And that brings me to pop quiz number 1. And so with luck, and we'll see what happens, Mathilde's going to share a link. And I would love you to take a guess at what percentage of customers provide at least 50 ratings by the end of the first 6 weeks of the service. And I've got some stuff. This is what Netflix looked like in 2007. You can see it's getting better. And I want to draw your attention to one little idea, which is the Movies You'll Heart tab. And that little heart, I'm sure there's some designers online. The designers described it as this whole tab as fugly, which I think is a combination of funky and ugly. But I just want you to draw your eye to it. Mathilde, is our technology working?
Yes, it should be working. I just shared the link with everyone. So if you just head to slido.com and you enter the tag Gibson, some votes are coming up. So it's working.
Oh my goodness, this is awesome. And who do I blame for the bug on the first one?
Well, I think YouTube, to be honest, or your friends at Google, because they didn't let
good. Yeah, I just want to know who I should complain to. All
Okay,
right, I'm gonna switch out. I'm gonna switch out for a second, and I'm gonna see what the results are. All right, so I learned a lot about the audience here. And this is where I learned the extent to which my audience is full of skeptics or youthful enthusiasts. So we got a lot of action down low. Oh, even more. Very good. So the collective wisdom, it kind of puts it in the, 5%-ish. Good guess. Now imagine you're at Netflix and you have the eStaff metrics that describes all of this customer behavior. And over time, you got to be a great guesser. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the result with you, and you will be surprised. So the answer is close to 30%. Over time, we were able to get our members to a place where in the first 6 weeks, the high watermark for this was 28%. And you can think for a moment about why it started dropping in 2010. And I want to help you understand why that metric grew as successful as it did. And it had to do with the invention of something that we called the ratings wizard. So a customer was attracted to that Movies You'll Heart tab, and they would run into this ratings wizard and said, the more the rate, the better we'll help you to find movies you'll love. And it was the invention of this one simple thing that drove a lot of the explicit data from our customers. And then to answer the question about why that metric started dropping off in 2010, it had to be, that's when the streaming started to be a big deal. And it turned out we were able to get a lot of the implicit data, so that the rating data wasn't quite as important to us because we knew what you watched and what you didn't watch. So that's my pop quiz number 1. And now I have a pop quiz 2 for you. So this is my family. That's Kristen. She's 55 on the left. That's Kelsey. She's 22. Brittany, she's 20. And that's me. I'm 56. My metric for life is, can I ski my age and ski days?
That's pretty cool.
So my second question is, will it be helpful to Netflix to understand the age and gender of them? And the idea is, will Netflix be able to better predict the movies that you'll love if it understands your age and gender? And Mathilde, I'm guessing that you've done your magic. Awesome.
9 people respond, 10 people are responding. In vast majority, yes. 67% say yes.
Oh, good. Okay, so of course you'll be surprised that the answer is no.
Should have expected that.
Yeah. And so the reason is that people's movie tastes are wonderfully unique. And what's more helpful and more important is to know just a few movies that they love. And this was surprising data to us as well. And I'll share with you, at first, a little mechanics. The first question, could we get the data? And 90% of our customers responded to this incredible design. And it did not help us. And I'll show you the data that we focused on to understand. And this metric is called RMSE, root mean squared error, but it's really the simple idea of, we expected that you can you'll like a movie 4 stars and you rated it 4 stars. We were perfect. We expected that you'd like a movie 5 stars and you rated it 5 stars. It was perfect. So this is one of those metrics where down and to the right is the good way. So if we drove it to 0, that would be an exceptional thing. And so when we added age and gender, it did not improve this RMSE data. So that was a valuable insight to us. And what was most helpful was an algorithm that we called collaborative filtering. And collaborative filtering is just better living through math. Mathilde likes Batman Returns, and she likes Orange is the New Black, and Seb likes both of those as well. And then we discover that Mathilde loves Star Wars. And then the idea is that Seb will like Star Wars too. And that is how collaborative filtering works en masse. The problem with collaborative filtering is it gives no insight as to why you like a movie. Why is it that somebody who likes Icon, in this case, will like Emily or Mostly Martha or Only Human? There's absolutely no context. But this, in fact, improved RMSE. And our real problem was we only had 2 engineers working on the collaborative filtering algorithm. So we did something, a big project, a big experiment, a big tactic. We outsourced it. We crowdsourced it. We told the entire development community around the world that if you can improve RMSE for us by 10% or more, we'll give you $1 million. And within a month, we had 10,000 engineers working on the problem. And this is the leaderboard. Newsflash, Belcor's Pragmatic Chaos won the $1 million. But the team names here give you insight, one of our first insights into how to do collaborative filtering better. Because if you look, the names are crazy. So number 4 is Opera Solutions and Vandelay United, this crazy amalgamation of people who were clearly into Seinfeld. But the idea here was that the more algorithms that you combine, the better. And what was happening was when teams realized they weren't going to win the million, they looked to their left or right or on the leaderboard, one above them, and they said, let's combine all of our algorithms together and we'll bump to first. And that's exactly what happened when Belcor combined with Pragmatic Chaos. So that gave us the insight that the more algorithms that you combine, the better. There was one other insight, which is all those ratings you did in your first 6 weeks, turns out they didn't have the predictive power. They were all the movies you watched in the past as the ratings of movies that you gave while you were on the service. This insight that the more algorithms, the better, led us to this idea of inventing new ones. And so we were looking at our friends Pandora. Pandora was across the bay. They have these musicologists who are tagging songs on all these different attributes. Jack Johnson is acoustic, he's mellow, he's slow paced, he's got surfer dude, for a 56-year-old male, which is all true. And for the first time, we were able to provide context for why folks will like a movie. So in this case, Netflix knew that I liked Airplane, and because of that, it thought that I would like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And it also was able to organize all these movies around a meaningful theme, which is cult comedies from the 1980s. Now, I want to give you a little surprise. We did A/B test the algorithm with improved RMSE, and it didn't improve retention, which was a bummer. The insight is it's both algorithms plus design that helps move things in meaningful ways. And that's a nod to teamwork between product managers and engineers and designers. And in fact, this category interest algorithm, you can see it combines algorithms, presentation layer. It did improve retention, which was remarkable. So Crystal Chincuti was maniacally focused on making it super easy for you to add DVDs to your queue. And you'll notice she drove that metric up and up and up and up, and it starts diving in 2009, 2010. And that's because Brent Arie's job was to inspire people to watch a lot of stuff, to watch at least 15 minutes a month. And that was up right. And around 2010, Netflix changed into a dramatically different company, which is focused on streaming. And now this brings you to a whole new level of questions about how to handle personalization better. And the question here, and I know Mathilde is French, or I think she is. The question here is, you've launched a service. Good. You've launched a service in lots of different countries. And the question is it helpful to know that a person is French, that they live in France? Will that inform the algorithm? And so I'd love it if you could take a moment to reflect on whether you believe it's helpful for Netflix in its personalization algorithms to know what country you're from. How are we doing, Mathilde?
We have 11 people who answered so far. So 55% say yes, 45% say no, 42% say no. People are a bit cautious now. They know it's not a very
serious. I'm faking them out.
So we have 60% saying yes, it's helpful to know that you're French.
Good. Well, of course, it's not helpful. And it leads us back to this idea that people's tastes are wonderfully unique. Now, I'll be fair to the people who said yes. At the very beginning of your life, we have no data about you. So in your very first session, for a moment, it's helpful to know that you're French. But once we start assessing your click data, what you're clicking on whatever platform, what you watch, the knowledge that you're French falls into the backseat almost instantly. And again, this reinforces the idea that people's movie tastes are wonderfully unique. So I hope I spelled that right, Mathilde. Did I?
Yes, you did. No.
Well pronounced. So now it's an international company, and we've talked a lot about star ratings, and this little company called Facebook went worldwide, and it created this system of thumbs up and thumbs down, which is substantially simpler than deciding whether you want 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars. And Netflix A/B tested it, and this was an easy decision. It got twice as much taste data with this simpler thumbs up and thumbs down, which leads a little bit to a problem, which is the star system is dead. And how do you reflect on whether a person will like a movie or not? And this brings me to the fourth hypothesis. This idea that over time, if Netflix is able to find you movies that you'll love, if the average ratings of all of those movies should get better. And the problem was we had no data to suggest that that was true. And that led to a lot of soul searching. So we reached out in focus groups and surveys. This is an example of existing data. There really wasn't anything that we could A/B test here. And it gave us an insight, which is this idea of movie enjoyment, whether you enjoy the movies you watch, it's not the same as movie rating. And I'll give you the insight why. When you're talking to a friend about a movie you like, you'll say, hey, I really enjoyed Hotel Rwanda. It's 5 star. You might bring up a heavy title like Schindler's List, high star rating. What you won't talk about or share is the fact that you watch Paul Blart's Mall Cop, which is the quintessential leave your brain at the door comedy. You rated it 3 stars, but it turns out that all those 3-star movies that you've been watching and you're not telling your friends about, they are the thing that cause you to retain. And this leads to the insight that it's all about movie enjoyment, and that stars are not a proxy for that. And so that leads to how do you handle this better? So if you look carefully at Netflix today, it's all about this percentage match idea. And the simple idea is that Casino, in this case, is a 98% match for me. It says nothing about the movie quality, but it does say that that Netflix believes that I will enjoy this. And it's a radical change. So I've taken you on a little journey about personalization. And the thing that I just love about this is that this is an example of, in 2005, the job was when you had 100,000 DVDs to choose from, it would help you to find a couple that you would love. And it was hard to copy, this personalization effort, and it helped build our business. In 2000, or early days of when we had to use sucky titles, it was working to find the needle in a haystack that you would love. And then today, with all of Netflix's original content, personalization is helping the company to inform the level of investment. So they know that 100 million people will watch Stranger Things, so they can afford to spend 500 million. And they understand that only 2 million people will watch BoJack Horseman. And because of that, they will make an investment of something like 10 million. And just the sheer idea that Netflix understands the movie taste of 130 million people worldwide is just incredible hard to copy advantage that they have. So I'd like to take you on to a sort of a last case. This is a current case. And it's the question that I posed earlier, which is today, Netflix, you engage in the trial, you give your credit card, and then at the end of the 30 days, it switches without notice to a paid service. And this idea came up from customer service data. And all the customer service people were nice. They said, hey, we're spending $10 million in phone calls with people who call up on day 29 or 30 saying, gosh, I meant to cancel and didn't. Now, I don't know anything about these people. Maybe their intent was to enjoy it for a month, or maybe they didn't like it, or maybe it was summer. But meaningful data suggesting that maybe Netflix can handle this better. And the other thing, there are fence sitters out there, people who are cancel any time is the way to bring a fence sitter into the fold. And it's an important statement. Now, I got to give you two pieces of existing data. The first is trials over visits conversion. And I want you to think for a moment, what % of folks click on that join free for a month and hand over their credit card to enjoy a 1 month free trial? And I'm guessing that you're thinking 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever your number is. And the reality is only 2%, which is a surprisingly low number. And I want to give you one other piece of data, which is at the end of that 1 month free trial, what % go on to the paid service? Now, in this case, you're thinking 60, 78. I have no idea what number you're guessing, or 40. The answer is it's 90%. It's remarkably high that they enjoy the service in that first month. And so the idea is to A/B test this idea. So send you a text. Your free trial is about to end. Send you an email. On your personalized homepage, say, your free trial is about to end. Be as aggressive as possible at letting you know that the free trial is about to end. And the question is, will this change customer behavior? Now, again, half the time, and people don't notice stuff. But in this case, they notice. And month one retention drops from 90% down to 85%. And now I can tell you the margin story, that this costs Netflix about $80 million, the loss of new customers here. Now we can back out the 10 million that isn't spent on answering phone calls. And this means you're going to lose about 70 million bucks. This is the margin story. And the question is, and now we have to think a little bit more about this to apply that delight customers in hard to copy margin enhancing ways. And the question is, what is delightful here? And I think most people would agree that it's really cool that a company would be so transparent about letting you know you're switching. And in fact, even if they chose to cancel, that they might come back 3 months later, they might tell a friend, or you can reflect yourself on how you feel about a company that might choose to do this. And that's the delight. And the hard to copy thing, this is the interesting thing. What's hard to copy in this, it's all about that relationship of trust and about building a great worldwide brand called Netflix. So on one hand, you have something that will delight a customer. You have this hard to copy thing, the perpetuation of the brand, of doing the right thing. And then the last is you're going to lose money. You're going to lose 70 million. Now at Netflix, this is the job of a product manager. This was Tom Willerer. There's a vigorous debate about what to do. People do not agree. The CFO thinks you're smoking crack. And then at the end of the day, it's Tom's job to decide. So Mathilde, can you give me any insight on what the wisdom of crowds is on this issue?
Yep, I can. So it was 50-50.
50-50.
No, it's 57 say yes. 57% say yes. Launch the trial.
I love it. I love it that the wisdom of the crowds is driving forward. Okay. And so in this case, Tom chose to launch the test to all. Now, I will give you 2 more pieces of data. The conversation with the CFO was not as hard as you think. And that is because at this point in time, Netflix has got $8 billion in revenue. And the CFO basically said, you know, 70 million against that 8 billion is not that big a deal. And then he understood the delight and hard to copy, the perpetuation of the brand. So I want to talk about some learnings from this. This is a quintessential case where delight trumps margin. Now recognize that very first case I did during this webinar about the new release test. Netflix was a young startup and just didn't have the money to do the right thing back then, to make an argument that the word of mouth was bigger than 2, that it might be 5. In this case, Netflix can afford to do this. So this is the kind of thinking that changes over time as a company grows. In this case, there is a cost to doing the right things and to building a successful worldwide brand. And in this case, it is exactly $70 million. And the other thing about A/B testing is you cannot measure everything. It still requires human judgment. In this case, it was not known whether that person who chose to cancel came back 3 months later. It was not known whether they raved about a friend and brought some others. But there was a guess that this was the right thing to do. And the other thing that I will say that can happen again and again in Netflix was the inspiration of these debates. You know, I call it good fights make good marriages. And then the debate is over. Tom decided, and everybody magically got behind him and executed on this plan. So there's one last thing in this world of customer obsession that's required, and this usually makes startup people feel good, and it is the idea of patience. It takes a long time to figure this stuff out, to get the collective wisdom of everybody in the building right and guessing these things. So you can see over time, you know, Netflix has grown to a market cap of almost nothing to a market cap of something like $150 billion. It takes about 20 years to make a great company. And I see this pretty consistently. In working with different companies, if I'm trying to understand whether they are obsessed, I'm really looking for 5 different things. 1, do they have existing data that helps me to understand both customer and business behavior? It's super important to me. And that's how I learned business, and I learn about how customers behave. The second is, do they have ongoing qualitative, the voice of the customer? Are they doing one-on-one usability? Are they engaged in focus groups on an ongoing basis? And in the case of Netflix, the other requirement is they do it outside of Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is full of freaks. They are not normal people. So we would fly to Minneapolis, where I think there are normal people. Is there existing survey data? I shared the NPS. I always knew why people were canceled. I knew the demographics. I was able to assess the quality of the streams. You might, from time to time, get sample data asking, hey, was the quality good? And then the big dog was A/B testing. That was the only way that we could really understand whether we were actually measuring change, and to do this balancing act between delight and margin. And the last thing that I looked for is, do they have a strategy? Do they have hypotheses about what they believe will help delight customers in these hard to copy, margin enhancing ways? So for me, customer obsession is about putting the customer at the center of everything you do to delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways to invent a better future. And so I'll end with another billionaire juicy quote. This is Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon. We've had 3 big ideas at Amazon that we've stuck with for 18 years. Put the customer first, invent, and be patient. But the most important thing is focus obsessively on the customer. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. I'm hoping you'll stay on for a couple of reasons, because I'm at this incredibly awkward moment where I'm sure you've seen street performers do their thing, and the moment that they pass the hat, everyone disappears. And I want you to stay just for a moment. I'm not going to ask for money. What I would love you to do is to visit www.gibsonbiddle.com. The very top of that page is a link for a Net Promoter Score survey for today's webinar. I promise I'm not selling anything.
You're just obsessed about the webinar attendance, right? Customer obsession, you need NPS.
Yes. Okay, so I'd love it if you could just take a moment. 0 sucks, 10 is awesome. that has been incredibly helpful data for me to figure out how to do these things better. There's a PDF of the presentation as well. And then I wrote an article on customer obsession. So all three of those links are sitting there at the top of that page. And then Matilda's going to follow up with an email, et cetera. But I'm going to be in London. I'm wicked excited about the JAM conference. I'm from Boston. Wicked is a Boston word. And then she'll send more details about this Hacking Your Career workshop. And at this moment, I'm happy to answer any questions. And, you know, Matilda's manning the chat. I love questions. That's how I learn. So Matilda, I'm going to shut up. And if you could be the voice of the folks online, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. So we have a question from Jack, who asks, could you speak about how you use A/B testing and personalization on thumbnail poster images and the impact it has? I don't know if you can speak about that.
Yeah, I can. So it's kind of mind-blowing. Netflix, at this stage, it's all about machine learning. So, and one of the things that they need to do is promote their original content. So if you come to your homepage on whatever device, there will typically be a new release, original content of Netflix. And what's going on is Netflix's original content doesn't have the benefit of a theatrical release. They don't have billboards in downtown London. So Netflix has to sort of help cold start those titles. And to Jack's question, they are essentially using machine learning to test what images attract attention that inspire people to hit the play button. And even more, that is highly personalized. So at this point, they begin to understand what kind of people are attracted to a couple that's an embrace versus action on the screen. And you've probably noticed that they're testing other things as well, auto rolling previews, which I know is annoying to some, but the hope or the expectation is that might actually help build brand awareness and trial. So the simple answer is it's at a high scale. All of those poster images are being tested, and in fact, it's being presented in a personalized way. It's a great question. Thank you.
Great. We have another question from Mike. How did the company change when moving from DVDs to streaming? Did it leave teams feeling divided? And how was it communicated to the company?
Yep. Okay. There's a couple chapters on this. So you saw the data when Brent's metric, the streaming metrics surpassed Crystal's DVD. And actually, just before that, we basically leaned forward a little to make streaming happen. And because we were leaning into our future, and we understood that the future was going to be about streaming. We wouldn't be competing with our dear friends in DVD. Okay, so that was chapter one. That happened pretty well. The bad chapter was 2011, when Netflix made a decision to separate its DVD business from the streaming business. It's only be perceived in the United States, but they launched something called Quickster. They separated the two services, and it was a disaster. And the reason they did that was they were afraid they were overinvest in DVDs, which was the past, at the failure to streaming in the future. If you look carefully at that market cap, you'll see in 2011, the market cap of the company dropped from 40 billion down to 10 billion, but they obviously recovered. So that transition was easy at first and hard because of a self-inflicted wound in creating the separate company. And that was one of those times where Reed, as he'll admit, he took his eye off the ball. He failed to obsess over customers.
Right, super interesting. A question from Annie. She's asking more about how do you organize teams, etc. So what are the key roles, she's asking, to hire in early stage startups looking for product market fits? How do you know what roles you need to hire for, essentially? And she's also talking about the trade-offs between having a copywriter and a growth marketing manager, for example, if you can speak to that.
Sure. Sorry, I got distracted for a second. Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Well, actually, she just removed it, but she was asking about how do you know what roles to hire in a product team as you grow and as you're looking for product.
Okay. Well, my first answer is come to my Hacking Your Career workshop. Because it's great. The requirements of different companies and stages are huge, but there's a set of technical skills of a product manager that they're not all technical, and then there's a set of leadership skills as you grow. Actually, if you want to read about it now, I wrote an article on Medium called Hacking Your Career. and the workshop is 10x better. However, I list the attributes of a product leader, and I'm very clear about how the requirements change at different stages in the career. Short answer, there is no short answer. Long answer, in 12 minutes, you can get a good answer if you read that article.
Good. So call to action, go read the article, and also get a spot for the webinar, Hack Your Product Career, your product leader career. We have 8 spots left, I think, for November 2nd. So all the links are actually below the video. You can find them also on Gibson's website. Another question from Jury: how much Netflix do you watch per week? Why? Question.
God. Okay. So the real answer is I do use Amazon Video. I do use Hulu as well. And gosh, okay. So the truth is, I've never watched real TV. My guess is I'm probably streaming order of magnitude 10 hours a week. I'm almost a little embarrassed about it. I actually read a lot, but not as much as I wish. And I actually write a fair amount, which makes me feel less guilty about rotting my brain binge watching. That's how I feel about it. To know me, my wife's, she's trying to cure cancer. So she holds me to this higher standard. The reason I leave companies is my wife saying, hey, Gib, what are you really doing for the world? So I left Netflix because she's like, I don't think the invention of binge watching is a good thing, Gib. And then I went to my next startup, which is focused on kids, or actually college students. And now my life is largely about purposes teaching, which I really love.
Nice. Other questions? Let me see. Stefan is asking, what was the process like to define the strategies, the product strategies at Netflix? How did you align those strategies with business objectives, and what were they?
Yeah. So Netflix, in one way, so I love monthly subscription services. So my job was to improve retention and bear in mind the margin. So really it was that simple. And honestly, you sort of got a sense of how my mind works. I did 2 things. I call it the Glee model, but that idea of getting big on DVD, leading streaming, and then expanding worldwide was the result of a set of exercises in my head about how this company would play out in chapters. And then to answer your question on strategy, honest to goodness, the exercise is, what are all the things can delight a customer? What are all the things that are hard to copy? And what are all the things that will help to build the business? And I looked for the intersection of those 3 things. And I gave you the long list of high-level hypotheses, product strategies. There are probably 12 of them in this presentation. And then I just began to experiment and discovered about half of them worked. And the tricky part was, getting into Friends for 3 years and then killing it. That was painful, but that's how invention and experimentation plays out. Personalization, that was a 10-year leap of faith, and it worked. But we had proxy metrics that percentage of customers who watched, who rated at least 50 movies in a month, or the first 6 weeks. That proxy metric said, you know what? We were able to move that, and we think we're on the right path because people value personalization. Welcome to invention. Welcome into risk-taking. Welcome to experimentation. If you can get these higher level theories and hypotheses right about half the time, you're doing a great job.
Cool. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much, Gib. That was really interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed the webinar. I certainly learned a lot from it. As we said earlier, Gib will be in London giving a talk at Jam. He'll be part of a really cool lineup along with speakers from DeepMind, Thread, The Telegraph, and early bird tickets are ending on Saturday. So now is the right time to go to your boss's desk and ask and convince him that you deserve to go with your team. And the webinar is on November 2nd to learn more about how to hack your product leader career, how to become a better product leader. If you work, you just got started in product, or you are working in product management at the moment. Anything to add, Gib?
Thanks a lot, Mathilde. Thanks, Seb. I know you're in the background. Look forward to meeting all of you in London early November. Thanks and goodbye.
See you in London.
Do the survey. Do the survey.
Do the survey. NPS is king.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gib. Bye. Bye, everyone.